about the July unrest, important July unrest. The reason I say this in quotes is because this term, this moment, this event is quite contested. Some people say it's food riots. Some people call it the Zuma unrest. It's entirely an ANC factional debate. Some people speak to the social conditions. Some people say there's a reason why it only happened in KZN Gauteng where there's ANC strongholds. What this moment was quite a watershed moment in South African democracy. But we must also understand but we must also understand this moment, not just speaking about the July unrest. Because the July unrest was a moment where we got to see a microcosm, a small world of what is happening in South Africa. There's a reason why this moment happened after COVID. There's a reason why it erupted while things were going, things in communities are not going as they were in the past. Maybe they've been like that for a long time. But tonight we're going to be joined by Comrade Kabir Singh. He's joining us from KZN. He's a journalist who was one of the co-authors of the book 8 Days in July. He covered essentially what was happening during that moment in July, but also about how government was aware of what was going on months before what actually took place. He also hopefully joined what will be on with us right now, two comrades from Abakali Vasanandolo, comrades who were actually physically there during the July unrest. And also, earlier today, many of you are probably coming from the prep session from 2 o'clock with activists in Cape Town. We're joined by Comrade Jacob, who's going to be speaking to us about what was, what was discussed at this at the prep session, what was learned, but also what was the experience here in Cape Town. Some of the social conditions of the work we used to talk about what people were experiencing in communities were not just something that took place in Gauteng and KZN. It's something that was experienced for us. So we also need to hear about what was happening in Cape Town, also what we were facing these last 2 years. But before we get to that, we're going to play a short trailer video so we can get into the mood, get a feeling of what we've seen during that time, and have a bit of context for this discussion. Thank you, sir. You can share the.
Not blanks.
Oh, don't believe in blanks. Believe in the shorts.
If you looting, we shooting. Mafia, abandon. If you are looting, we are shooting.
The community just wanted to identify the bodies in that site, and then no one is allowed to go and identify because there are these rumors that there are so many bodies that are lying over there in that Phoenix place.
As a government, are extremely concerned about what happened here. And we are doing everything to deal with it. And it's quite clear that all these incidents of unrest and looting were instigated.
A year since the July unrest that swept through KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng provinces, the unrest believed to have been sparked off by the imprisonment of former President Jacob Zuma for contempt of court caused widespread looting of shops and businesses, leading to the deaths of over 300 people.
Provincial government has been, giving different messages with regards to what really happened in the area of Phoenix. For instance, the Premier called it a massacre, but you chose to use a different term. Why?
Well, I think that's the point we're making, is that a lot of the facts are not completely known. I see just yesterday or today there was a report on the number of people who died versus the actual number who died because of violent action, and there's a huge disparity. So I think one of the points being made is that, yes, overall, I think there's a particular impression, but it's a lot of the detail of what happened, where, when, and how that's still not quite in the public domain.
There's no guarantee that what happened in July last year will not happen again. The reason why I don't want to stand here and sound like a prophet of doom, the reason why I say that is because I've not heard anything that tells me, as a resident of this province, how that happened and why did that happen.
Thanks, Thomas. So that was basically a bit of an overview of some of what happened, obviously, in the July unrest in 2016. But before we actually go into it, I'm going to speak comment the real article, what actually took place descriptively about what actually happened in July. First, on the hand of the comment, to basically take us through, what was the context that this was happening. I mean, we were engaged on, we weren't engaged at the end of the Johannesburg. But the social condition that we call it, like the condition on the ground, what we were facing during COVID was before, was something that was felt throughout the country. Speaking from own experience, talking about activists, what was the context here?
First of all, good evening, ladies and gents. My name is Tim. I come from the boards of verification and years. So today we had a workshop discussing the Unrest, and one of the things that we discussed was very the three major issues that we faced in the past 2 years. Number one is the taxi violence that happened last year. We traveled because of the taxis, so we had to send homes. So number two, since we have this meeting that happened as well, and one of the things that will involve to us is that the CPF, especially culture, we have a system that was not going good. Number three as well, sharing. One of the things that we as the young people that we're facing, one of those key issues is that, number one, what are we going to do with those terms of it? Because there's a saying that the future tomorrow. What is this tomorrow that's going to be? Is it going to be the tomorrow of poverty that we're going to face again? Is it going to be no sharing that is still going to happen? Also, one of the things that we discussed is that we're discussing that something is a human crisis that's happening to us, and that one of the major issues that happen is that there's a division of agency, and the other parties as well. So we need a big factors in South Africa, and the July unrest, which is 1 year from now, revolves around the factors of poverty, school places, and the rest of the South Africans as well. And the future tomorrow, which is as well as education. Because if we do not get education, it's still going to resolve the effect of the interest in case we are going to most of the interest so those are one discussion.
Thank you for my takers. I mean, this is not a panel discussion. I also want to, we're not going to have a session where they talk and then respond kind of thing. I also want to get some feedback from the audience. All of us were engaged with COVID. Some of us are organizing feeding schemes. Some of us are dealing with the GBV, domestic violence increases that happen. Can anyone else kind of answer the question, basically, the conditions of last year? Have they changed on the ground? Are communities better off? Is poverty decreases? Are there more jobs? Are the conditions the same or have they changed? Anybody want to give input on that? From advisement, I know too. Anybody else? Let's take 3 hands. From advisement, I don't have a bit of a gender balance. Advisement, yeah. Let's just take those 2 for now.
Those conditions are so changed. I think what I'm saying is so that the conditions have not changed. And there's absolutely no indication that it will change anytime soon. From last year, July unrest now. You see, the question of it was during the process of the lockdown and crisis. Most of the people losses, lost their jobs. I'm going to speak on the context of occupations, right? Then at that time, people were able to park. But some of these occupations, there were still spaces there. And we find a lot of people who were still coming to these occupations, asking for spaces because they were ready to, but entrenchment started there. So those people actually felt that we are no longer capable at the same state, which is heavy. So I think the crisis here is the same that the conditions have worsened in terms of the standard of the problem. So the poor are still in the same position, and it's absolutely no indication. The occupations are not catered for, but when it comes to the looting, they were still to come. It was kicked out and the occupations were there. People decided that it's fine. You'll find people suffering from these occupations.
Thank you, Comrade. So obviously the desperation was there before, it was probably there before that. Comrade, you want to say something as well?
Just to echo what there's no change in that change. The reason I'm saying that is that all brothers and sisters on other planets, from the last year when we changed the government, that was COVID-19 and stuff, people lost their jobs. But today, it's a new year. Then the COVID, our president said that one of us is can be and whatever. But does the people get their jobs back? Not yet. But the only thing that is happening is poverty. And also just another thing that they say it's due to poverty, due to not working and such stuff. But it's look like now it's because our people, black people, we suffering, we don't have job, no job. No one person said that I lost my job and from last year, so today. But why? We are the only people that are suffering from all this stuff, but they are only blaming one party.
Thanks so much. We're going to open up the hands as we go on, but let's also just spotlight Kavil. Kavil, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thanks for joining us. Firstly, for taking time to actually be part of this discussion. So you obviously wrote the book 8 Days in July, your journalist obviously based in Malaysia. And I'm assuming you were brief there while it was taking place?
Sorry, I didn't hear you there.
Were you there while the unrest was taking place?
Yes, wow, yes, I was definitely there while the unrest unfolded. Thank you for having me. Thanks to everyone there that actually came out for this. I really appreciate it. Having this platform to chat to you guys. I mean, I think I'll start just after the arrest of former President Jacob Zuma. I mean, just to give you guys some context about what was happening on the ground that evening. I mean, we were, in terms of the journalists, we were basically positioned at different prisons, the Westfield prison, the Escort prison. It was winter in KwaZulu-Natal, and it was quite cold. We had already been working flat out for quite a few days. And, once his arrest was effected, which was a very difficult thing to do, we had a process where there were people that were very loyal to the former president, that were armed, that were heavily armed, that were at his homestead. And it was a very sort of sensitive position that the police were in as well, because nobody wanted violence to break out. I mean, there were children, there were women, there were families that were stationed there at the time. But thankfully, after some careful police negotiations, he was eventually arrested. He was detained at the Escort prison, and almost immediately. I mean, I think he went in around 1:30 in the morning, and by the early hours, I mean, later that day, we heard reports of trucks stopping, vehicles, stopping other truck drivers, blocking the roads, while Minister Beki Cele was patting himself and police officers on the back for doing a good job in Richards Bay. Ironically, at the same time, just down the road from where his parade was taking place, there was absolute violence that had emerged. So one of the patterns that we immediately began seeing, I mean, I was on the road in Durban probably from around 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. that morning. We'd been running on just a few hours of sleep. And one of the things we saw were protests breaking out all over the city. So if you were in, for example, Alpine Road or Morningside, the modus operandi was you would have groups of people come there. They would begin a protest, start setting tires alight, start causing real chaos, busting bottles, really warranting a police presence. And once you had police there, the people that really instigated that sort of small protest, riot, whatever it is, would move on to the next spot, perhaps on Mgeni Road. And they would begin doing that there. And the police would have to divert to that spot. This is what really thinned out the resources of the police. And this pattern of protests and sort of running battles with communities and with police was the first thing that we began seeing. And later on, we saw the very intensive, I wouldn't say the looting was intensive, but the organization on the ground was it was something we'd never seen before. Excuse me, and it appeared that everyone was really caught on the back foot at that time. I know it's conversational, so I don't know if that's okay. Sorry, I think you guys are muted.
Bill, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. So Bill, obviously you gave us a kind of pretext of the first things you began seeing. And I mean, something that I've just picked up from what you were saying is at least at the outset, you saw quite a bit of organization in terms of what was going on in the initial steps. And we're going to come back to that because obviously there's the question of was that organization present towards the end, or was there an organic element that took put afterwards? So we'll get back there. But I also want to just welcome Comrade Tapelo. Comrade Tapelo, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, but it's a bit fuzzy. I can hear you, but not clearly.
Okay, but you can make out what I'm saying at the very least. Sorted. Okay, so Comrade Tapelo, thank you for joining us from Amaklale. I'm hoping you can understand what I'm saying now because the echo in the room. But I wanted to ask you, I mean, as somebody who's actually there, and as somebody who's there, as part of the communities who saw what was going on, what was the first kind of awareness you had that this moment was unfolding? And what was the initial response from comrades in Amaklale, comrades in the community to what was going on? What were you speaking about at that time?
Okay. No, thank you very much for the opportunity. I don't know if you can hear me very well. Well, the social unrest, because that's what we want to refer to as riots. The arrest, of course, it happened as a result of the arrest of the former president after he defied the constitutional courts. But we must acknowledge that there are deep fundamental inequalities that have been taking place in South Africa. A lot of people lost their jobs during COVID. We had an economy that is not improving. 75% of young people who live in the informal settlement township in the rural areas are still unemployed. And of course, there was hunger and starvation on the ground. And the voice was clear that some people who took food in the shop were not even understanding what was happening. Some of them that we came across said, "We don't know who Zuma is. We don't know. We didn't even know that the former president was arrested." But we were told that there was an opportunity to go into the supermarket and get food for free, and we did exactly that. If it was a government that serviced people in the informal settlements, a government that created jobs, a government that fought against the inequalities that are taking place, the unemployment that is in the country, we would not be in that situation where we are. The organization that happened as a result of the desperation, happened as a result of the people on the ground saying that we've had enough. So the arrest of the former president was just a trigger. It was a waiting moment. It was a time-ticking bomb. And the anger of the people can go in many directions. And one of them was this one, of the riots. When people went and took food into the shop, some, in fact, the majority, I mean, there were instigators. We might not be, if you look at the president of Abahlali Zondo presenting at the Human Rights Commission, he made it very clear that there was evidence that he had and wanted to give it to the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, that there were people who wanted to target the house of the Chief Justice, the then Deputy Chief Justice. There were people in the WhatsApp groups who were creating this, and there were calls that were made, voice notes and so on. So there were instigators. But there were people who saw the opportunity and said, look, if there's an opportunity for us to get groceries that are very expensive for us to get every month, for us to be able to get things that we've never able to get, then they went into the shops and unfortunately, as normal, a capitalist government always responds by actually attacking the poorest of the poor. Immediately after that, there was an operation called Show Your Slip, and that operation was targeted people in the informal settlement. Basically, what it means is that show your slip of the groceries that you have in your house. If you have a fridge, you must show that fridge you bought, you must have a slip, and so forth, which led to police killing one woman in Lamontville, in our area, where they just came into the community shooting and everything and so forth. Yes, of course, we understand that there were people who targeted the poorest. Some of the things that have happened, one asked himself today, the Mr. Price in West Street in Durban only got banned 3 days after it was looted. So it means that somebody left the explosives there. So how do you blame a person who came and took clothes in that shop? So there was something that was actually planned by certain individuals who were saying that because of the Zuma issue, we are there to do this. But there were poor people in the line who said, we are going there because this is an opportunity for us to take whatever is there in the shops. But just to wrap up, is the unrest going to happen again? Has government dealt with the issues that are on the ground, the grassroots issues? Are the people in the informal settlement being serviced in KwaZulu-Natal? Are the people in the young people getting jobs? Is the economy improving in this country? Has the government dealt with the fundamental issues of the people on the ground? No. Ramaphosa visited Mr. Price in Springfield and assured capitalists who are selling that the Mr. Price will be opened. People were rallied around to actually volunteer and clean up in that particular area. Now you are trying to please business, but you are forgetting about the very people who were in the forefront or in the center of all of this. So the poorest of the poor, as always, has been left. And I was, in fact, born and raised in Bombay. So Bombay is a place next to Phoenix. I lived there until the late 90s. I know Ichalimyama, Maoti, Maotana. So all these areas are the areas where the 30 odd people were killed in Phoenix. Some of them, identify as the so-called looters and so forth. And let me tell you, let's not even speak about what had happened there, but there's always been a factor, and this is a fact. The Bombay area is an area of informal settlements. It's the area of the poorest of the poor. And it was separated. If you go to unit 10, 11, you will see that there's a road that goes there that separates the Indian community, which is supposedly discriminated by this apartheid government, supposed to be the middle class and the poor. And it has always been that the people on the other side are coming to this side to seek for jobs, because this is the better area of the two areas. This is an apartheid special planning that is still existent even today when you go there. So from a point of privilege, and we've emphasized this in our social cohesion discussions, because there needs to be a discussion, an open discussion between Africans and in general, Black and the Indian community, particularly in that particular area. There needs to be an engagement between the community in Bombay, Chelimyama, Maoti, and everywhere else, with the people that were killed. The community that has been accused of killing people. And of course, if you read our statements that we've written, we saw opportunism from the likes of EFF and the ANC Youth League and other political parties such as the Democratic Alliance, who were trying to enter into the fore and get votes. But it was not a time to do that. It was a time to show leadership. Because in this country, at that time in this province, there was vacuum in leadership. The premier was quiet. The ANC was nowhere to be seen. Leaders were nowhere on the ground. And it required us as a social movement to actually take a stand. And we said that we see opportunism from the EFF, who went and took people for a march in that particular area. I must emphasize the killings of the 30 more people in that particular area by people who formed borders, that people who don't live in this area must not go into this, because I'm speaking from a point of my shack was burnt with 300 shacks in my community on the 11th. Yesterday, I was commemorating a year since our shack were burnt. And we still don't know what happened, but I do remember that there was petrol. And there was a tweet that came from somebody in Pietermaritzburg of Indian descent, who said, let's go and burn all the shacks because that's where the looters are. Those are some of the things that we need not to utter in our society, especially as we are leaders. There was racial killings. People were attacked because of color. People were attacked because there was belief of that they were looters. But Indians are not racist.
Comment the middle, are you still there? I think he's might have frozen. Okay, hopefully he'll join us again. Comment the middle took us through a world with the different things that happened during this moment. There were a couple of things we were
You don't use a particular group of people who decided to take a particular stance. The entire race is because there were people in the let's go and
Am I not on mute?
You lost me there.
Sorry, you disconnected for a second, so we lost what you were saying. But also, we want to be taking us very much deep into the conversation. We can definitely going to go. I also want to touch on some of the things and ask the audience about some of the things. You mentioned quite a lot of the aspects of the unrest, which you want to go into as well. Do you just have a closing point, and we'll continue on?
Sorry, Comrade Mo, I didn't get that.
Okay, then we were saying you were raising some really important aspects of the discussion, but we also then want to comment on all the different aspects of it. But we want to open up a bit to mention, further discuss some of those points. Just have a closing point before we come back to some of those issues.
No, I was saying that we need not to promote racism. We need not to encourage people for any other issues. People who are poor in this country are Indian. People who are poor in this country are colored. People who are poor in this country are white. People who are poor in this country are African, black, and therefore, if we are saying
connectivity. Okay, Comrade Tapelo, we're going to come back to you. Comrade Tapelo, there's something that was raised as
that we must, because of the killings that took place in Phoenix, we must attack a certain race because of that. You will end up attacking people who are just as poor as ourselves, who are struggling as ourselves. Form of racism.
Okay. Comrade Tapelo, can you hear us? Are you still with us?
Muted him, but it's very delayed reaction.
Camille, can you still, yes, are you with us?
Yeah, I've got you guys. I hear you.
So Camille, there's something that Tapelo raised at the beginning, which was this discussion I also heard in the prep session today. It was this discussion about, there were social conditions, there was poverty, there was desperation, there were people who were going to the malls and to the shopping centers because they saw an opportunity to get food. They saw an opportunity when there was no jobs, when there was no sources of relief from government, and they took the opportunity to actually have a decent moment, an opportunity to actually have survival. But at the same time, from Comrade Tapelo, from yourself, and I really want you to speak to maybe some of the evidence for this. There was targeted burning of certain district centers. The N3 was blocked off. There was a certain amount of what people would say, insurrection, targeted attacks on certain spaces, just caused political instability and harmed the economy in real ways that we still see today. How do we begin to reconcile this reality that people were in a desperate situation, but also there seems to be some sort of organized political activity at the same time? How do you make sense of both of those things? I'm asking Comrade Tapelo first, but it's a question for all of us, because this is at the heart of what we're discussing earlier today, and I also want to hear how you feel about this. So Tapelo, you're going to start us off with some of the evidence of what you saw about both sides.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I would appreciate it. I mean, when Tapelo was talking, there were so many things he said that I can relate to. I can understand exactly what he's talking about, because it's a very accurate picture of what was on the ground. I think, there was a bit of confusion by the people who were sort of instigating this. They wanted it to be this way, where things are sort of undefined and it's just complete chaos. But there were quite a few of us on the ground who saw the reality of what was happening. There were indeed instigators. There were 100% instigators. I personally saw them. I mean, if I can give you an example, I think it was around the 11th or 12th of July that my colleague and co-author Jeff Wicks and my editor Adrian Besson managed to sort of arrange a helicopter tour of the city for me while all of the unrest stuff was happening, at the peak of it, really. And one of the main things that I saw in the south of the city in particular were groups of men in unmarked vehicles, very heavy duty vehicles that could either pull massive security garage doors out, or in the case that I saw, transport a massive amount of tires. They would go to key link roads in different parts of the city. They would lay these tires out and they would set them alight. And once they did this, they would go to a different part of the city. And while that was happening, like I explained before, the police would come there, and they would try and sort of clear up the area. And by this time, people were almost called to sort of loot because, okay, we've dropped the garage doors, we've blocked the police from coming, come in guys and do this. So what we describe this as in our book is the weaponizing of poverty. There were people that were responsible for years of poverty in South Africa. We talk about 9 wasted years. It's something that's very contested. But I think if you look at, you were a few people in the audience were talking about the last year and whether there have been improvements. Quite frankly, things have declined at an exponential rate. If you look at what happened before the unrest, businesses and people in general were already struggling because of the COVID-19 restrictions. And that was already putting such a strain on economies, on people that were already struggling for jobs to get some kind of work opportunities, not even jobs. I'm talking about work opportunities. There's a very big difference. Government always says work opportunities and it never says permanent jobs, because work opportunities implies something that could even be temporary for just 2 months or 3 months. When COVID hit, all of those sort of things it was gone. So by the time the unrest was at our doorstep, people were very desperate. I spoke to a couple of ladies. Tapelo was talking about, I think he was talking about the macro in Springfield Park and the cleanup that was happening. People were galvanized to clean up, and the president came to Durban after, he mentioned that politicians couldn't be seen. That's 100% correct. There was nobody on the ground. It's not just us that were, as media, trying to hold politicians to account. You had key stakeholders in your communities. You had CPFs, you had community leaders, civic associations, trying to reach premiers, trying to reach councillors, MECs, any public official they could. And phones were, for those first few days, going to voicemail. And, one wonders, it's conjecture at this point, whether for some people that was on purpose or not. Now, I was speaking earlier about, we were talking about the sort of organization of this, and there's been mentions of crime intelligence. And what role do crime intelligence really play? A lot of people say crime intelligence is defunct, and to a large degree, they are 100% correct. There's been abuses of there's corruption, not abuses, there's just plain corruption of slush funds, cash just being taken. And, it's made to seem like it's given to informants, but it's not. South Africa has a massive shortage of informants. And if anyone who has expertise in policing ever speaks to you, they'll tell you, for example, now we have this tavern issue. It's in the spotlight because over the course of a weekend, we had 21 people brazenly shot and killed. But what is the response from police? Boots on the ground? Let's go and raid places. That's not how it works. We always have a police force that can go in and, work with their weapons, work with tactics, work with forces. But what about the intelligence? Intelligence is what really drives understanding of communities. Do we have police on the ground who know exactly, this is a tavern here, this is the owner, this is a good owner, this is somebody who really, when someone's drank too much, tells them to go home. This is someone who deals drugs under the counter. We just don't have that. We don't have police who are engaging with communities. But getting back to the whole question of intelligence and what was happening on the ground, there were some warnings. If you look at the RET structures, the ANC branch structures, there were crime intelligence reports that were saying former President Jacob Zuma has a massive following, and these people could mobilize. And I think to a large degree, that's what we saw. We saw the use of these branches and these sort of factional fighting essentially spilling out onto the streets. Tapelo mentioned that Mr. Price in the CBD. Ironically, when he mentioned that, I was there the moment that it actually caught fire. And it was probably the last few hours of the violence. Police had by then really gotten control of the situation. So you have to ask yourself, this place had already been looted. Everything was taken from it. What was the reason behind really burning it down? And a year later, we don't have any of those answers. I mean, a press briefing was only held on the 1-year anniversary. The only real information we got outside of that was a Human Rights Commission, where a lot of people went and testified, and the light was shed on these issues in Phoenix. The barricade, the worst barricade, was discovered through the Human Rights Commission testimonies. The one that was ironically closest to the police station was the most violent. People spoke about not even being asked any questions. Just because you are a person who is Black, you are pulled out of your vehicle and violently assaulted. I mean, people didn't know during those assaults if they were going to get out alive. And another issue to bring up in those areas is the proliferation of drugs and how it's really corrupted those communities. But yeah, I think I'll leave it to the floor and let you guys have your inputs. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Camille. So guys, I'm going to open it up for more hands at this point. And we're focusing on this question, right? We've heard and discussed about what people were going through on the ground. Also heard some evidence from Camille and others about some of the strategic, targeted, organized attacks we've seen. I want to ask, firstly, how do you make sense of what happened? So, but also, if you were in Cape Town, what was happening here during that time? I heard there were some attempts on, I think it was a Kailita Mall, but there were others who were actually responding to that. What was happening here? Why didn't this moment in KZN and Gauteng take fire here? What was being discussed in the communities when this was happening? You can hear about that kind of national, national understanding what was happening at that time as well. So I'm going to take a couple of hands. Would you like to go first? Okay. Please open us up from the way.
First of all, eventually I was going to the question is the same. It's okay. So one of the key factors why Cape Town didn't happen was it was taxi violence. You can't go to another place because what taxi drivers did, the taxi companies that if you travel to another taxi, they will shoot you. So for example, if Carter was in Hightech at that time, Carter was going to be stolen with shot at the drivers. So that was one of the issues why Carter was very new that. Also one of the reasons was that this thing of care that depicted at SASA. Trying to depict it is not enough in months. That's me to be honest. That's not enough. That's just 2 days, 3 days, but one of the issues that's still happening around. So one of the things that still happened last year was that around 2 cases as well, that there were a number of people that died. It is still not recorded how many people that died, but there were less than people that died. So yeah, that's where we're going to end.
Thanks, Thomas. So we're taking hands now. What was happening here in Cape Town at the time? Why do you think it didn't happen here? But also, how do we make sense of this plotting from above, but also reality on the ground? Anybody want to do it? I see some hands here. One, Lunga next. Anybody else? Why think you already spoke? Take it now.
From the organization because as I very back when I said and during lockdown we actually when we started, we noticed that there was no intervention. Once they actually announced that the country is in lockdown. So with some friends, we decided to do something, which is cooking for the people. We focused on making young children and elderly people.
specifically in informal settlements, because in Brown's Farm, in one ward, there was more than, in one ward, there's actually 13 informal settlements. That was prior COVID. I don't know how many informal settlements that you actually have at this moment. So we wanted to focus on some of them because we knew that prior COVID, they were experiencing high unemployment rate, they were experiencing crime already. So we had to be there because there was no intervention from the government. While we were doing so, I think we were waiting. There was one time when the president was supposed to announce, and we're expecting to hear that the government was going to give us a guideline on how to go about assisting the people on the ground, because there was no funding involved, but the only source of assistance was coming actually from Cape Town together and all these social movements that were there. So when the president announced, we could find that there's no direction. Everybody felt cornered because some of the organizations that were already on the ground, they were actually drained because there was no funding that was coming forth. And I think that's one of the reasons why people in Devon felt like there was an opportunity for looting. And this looting, it was a collective effort. For people that have social issues, this was an opportunity. But for people that are out of the political realm, this is a scapegoating, because if during looting there was not even one political leader who wanted to take a stand and actually say something about this, it means that everybody knew about this. And on the other side, it speaks to the level of leadership in South Africa, from the ground level to the top level. So if there's no guidance, if there's no leadership, a country will always be like this. And when you talk about looting, guys, let us not focus on this. This is just nothing. This July Unrest thing is nothing. These lootings are happening in Black communities every day. If, for an example, a truck of food got an accident, the first thing that people do, they focus on looting the truck until it's empty. Even the drivers, they take the cell phones before they call the police. So those are lootings that people don't actually talk about. There's looting on the top level of funds that is supposed to be going down to the people. So leadership has been looted already. We don't have it. That's the reality. It's a fact. Let's not dramatize it. Yes, looting has happened in Africa. African resources have been looted by countries until this day. South Africa is a country that accommodates all African citizens because there's looting across Africa. So South Africa will be no exception. And the fact that nobody is actually even accountable for what happened in July, it speaks to the fact that as we speak, there are people that are preparing to loot because we are in the very same state that we're actually at. And what's even worse, because take into account the fact that that was prior COVID, we had social issues, we had health issues, we had unemployment rate that was actually escalating. And this is post-COVID. And not even any of those issues have been accommodated or even addressed. So we're actually a ticking time bomb. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Comrade. Lunga?
Yeah, good evening, comrades. So, yeah, I think, so last year, I was part of a very radical meeting. Yes. Yeah. A very radical meeting, comrades, there in Santi, where we were planning to move Santi Plaza, and I'm saying to National Commission because I want them to arrest me. You know, we were planning to move Santi Plaza, comrades, but then these gatekeepers of the elite classes, the CPF, they were saying, not in my plaza. I said, yeah, as if they benefit from the private property installation, right? Yeah. Okay, yeah. As if they benefit, when ShopRite releases some of those funds. So, yeah. So the most issue of was because we were affected, by social issues in Khayelitsha. Because when COVID hit, the people with big wallets ran to Marco, ran to Spa, ran to your shop, and bought foods in large quantities. So now, in our communities, we were left with nothing but hunger, comrades, and the prices were spiking. So I was also part of that meeting, comrades, to root, ShopRite, off-site plaza, comrades. So I was there, comrades. Then these gatekeepers of the private part of ShopRite, CPF, noting my plaza as if they are benefiting when ShopRite releases its funds, because ShopRite has done nothing inside C in order for employment, comrades. Martha.
Thanks, Comrade.
Good evening, comrades. My name is Azor, comrades. I was saying, believe it. I would say, in my own view, I would say, but I think why did this not happen in my community? What was happening in the thinking? I would say, like, I would talk about the young people in my community. I would say that they are ignorant of the information or what is happening around our countries. And also, there's also like, there's no information, they're not informed about these things that are happening. And those people who want the information, they are ignorant about the stuff because, for example, I will just make a similar example, a small example. In the street where I stay, there's no young person who's working. We're all unemployed. We sit there, chilling in the sun, doing nothing. So, like, even with, like, most of the time, I was like, okay, even if we do this good thing, we still stay unemployed. So that's why I, in my own belief, I would say, like, they're ignorant. And also, I do believe that such organizations, for example, like Zondo and other things that are happening in Chisumari, we don't have. For example, for me to be able to reach the space, I had to go to have a friend in college. And then one of my friends in college tell me about these spaces. So there's also a lack of spaces just such like these ones, where young people could be taught about these things that are happening. Thank you.
Thanks, I want to add to this discussion. I mean, so some comments who were in favor of what was going on in KZN. Were any comments, very, very against the looting that was taking place, maybe defending some of the, I heard some maybe defending some of the spaces, or is that not in the room? Was there just widespread agreement with the actions taking place in KZN, or was some people saying, we're not going to do this, we don't think it's part of our way we do things? Anybody who was defending the places that were occupied? Are we going to speak to this? Anybody else? Was it? Okay, we're going to go that person.
Good evening, everyone. I was going to reflect on 2 points actually. The primary point, I think I'm going to attend to it in the last one. Okay. My name is Samora. I'm coming from Khayelitsha, from an occupation name level 2. I am part of Y. Sorry, IYM, meaning income mathematics company. I would say, first of all, the municipality or the government of Cape Town, they were very lucky that during the course of COVID-19, we were still in grooming due to the impact of COVID-19. And we were still trying to make means to live under the circumstances of informal settlement. Now, we had to focus on one thing at a time, meaning that the main thing that we were focusing on is for the government to deliver the services, meaning that the Constitution of South Africa says by its bylaw that was legislated by their legislator, saying that if someone occupied in a space, the government needs to make means for that person to live on that environment, meaning that emergency services the government must issue. But unfortunately, we've been staying there on our occupations without any emergency services. So we're still under the impact of COVID-19. That was the reason that we did not focus on this looting, or we did not even decided to loot, because of check to know that first of all, there are two classes that are being underlined, the working class and the poor class. There are those in the poor class that were not even attempting to go and look for a job. And there were those that who looked for a job, and fortunately they found a job, but unfortunately the jobs were taken away from them due to COVID-19. So if those people were unable to provide themselves due to the COVID-19, how would it be possible for them to sustain themselves in years to come or in months to come after that 1 month of July? So we decided that we need to overlook things, not to be stimulated by emotions, or not to be agitated by not permanent emotions. My ending is that I think we as leaders of whatsoever leader, we need to make sure that any looting in Cape Town particular, it is not accepted. Because of when people saying that is South Africa, I think when someone says South Africa, they're only referring to Joburg, they're only referring to Durban, they're only referring to those provinces. But here in Khayelitsha, it seems that we are in another country, or in Cape Town, another country, because of, if you wish to know the number of services that are being provided, it is not the same provision in these areas, in these other provinces. So I'm saying that we made sure that none of the looting is taking place due to the fact that we were facing the difficulties because of unemployment. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. We're running out of time, and there's a final point we want to reach in this discussion, which is, firstly, what's happened since it's been a year. We heard a bit about the human rights report by the presidential expert panel about what happened. I think there's a secondary report from the Human Rights Commission as well. And there was an address, I think, yesterday or the day before by the media addresses that we spoke to before. Well, what happened since? But then there's this question that's been lingering in the air. Will this happen again? Are we going to, is this the start of a new norm? Does it need to be instigated by political forces from above? Will it come from below? Is it both? And this is important for us to kind of reconcile as activists and also have a stance on how we feel about it. Part of what last year was us reflecting on what does this mean going forward? How do we feel what happened? What does it mean going forward? Where will we be? Where will we stand at this? So I want to just give closing statements to Comrade Capello. Yeah, Comrade Capello is still there, but maybe when he joins in on the video, we'll start with Kabir. So Kabir, just shortly, what's happened in this year since the unrest took place? What have we seen? Who's been held accountable? Do we know who passed away? Who's died? There's 300+ people who died in that time. Who's been arrested? And what do the reports say about the July unrest? And maybe with just a closing part, what do you think this means in the future? I'm going to ask Sandy to comment on Pedro, and then we can open up the rest of us having that time. Kabir, you can go first.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the main things lacking over the last year is one of the main things lacking in South Africa for the last 10 years, which is consequence management. We've heard reports last week of thousands of people that were arrested. But then at the same time, we were told that thousands of people were released because there weren't enough police resources, and it appeared to be sort of shoddy evidence, and police let those cases go. But we still haven't seen the actual architects of this unrest. And that's one of the big things that really scares a lot of South Africans. I think also the fact that we're sitting with a ruling party that, number one, has far too many old people in it. I mean, I heard a young lady speak just now who said that, young people are just sort of sitting around. And unfortunately, it's a very small group of men, mostly in government, and together with business people that are stealing and taking those jobs away from you, which is a very sad thing. But I think a year later, it's the lack of leadership. Not much has changed. I mean, if you look at the epicenter of this unrest, which was KwaZulu-Natal, Durban, after the flooding that hit in April, we had the exact same type of leadership we've had from last year, which is slow to react, allegations of corruption, communities that are frustrated, and politicians that just don't care. Last week, Friday, was the 1-year anniversary. Today is the 12th of July. And from then till now, we haven't heard anything about the unrest from the mayor of the city, Mxolisi Kaunda. I mean, this is a man whose city this happened in. It happened under his watch. He hasn't said a single thing. Last week, Friday, Premier Sihle Zikalala very quickly ran through his unrest program. I mean, he spent less than 5 minutes on Nandi Drive. Nandi Drive was a site of where the game sort of factory was burnt down. I mean, Game City in Durban has also, which had one of the oldest game stores in the country, closed down. And the premier spent less than 5 minutes there. I mean, I was following his convoy. By the time I arrived, he was gone. So, I mean, that level of lack of concern. To give you another example, he said that the social cohesion that's been happening, there has been social cohesion happening between the communities of Bombay, Phoenix, Amaoti, and Zwelisha. That's not true, because I spoke to those people before he sort of began his tour of the city, and there's the Indian community is afraid of the Black community, and the Black community is afraid of the Indian community. There's no cohesion there at all. He said that a sports day that he hosted a week before was a form of social cohesion. I mean, that's also 1 year later. The fact that there's no proper effort from the people that really have the power is a clear indication of why everyone is so afraid. KwaZulu-Natal still has 11.5 million people and still has just 18,000 officers, and public order policing that is just not up to scratch. So if we have these architects still without any sort of consequence management, where were the police? Yeah, I mean, I've tweeted videos of what I told you, those men with the tires blocking the roads. Did anyone investigate that? Was there any sort of interrogation of those people? Did we get them? Did we speak to them? Did we find out who put them there? Who funded them? The fact that all of these questions remain unanswered is one of the reasons why people still believe that another unrest can occur. And the fact that the factional fighting in the ruling party is as worse as it's ever been is a massive cause for concern.
Thanks, Gil. Thanks, Gil. Just so, do you see, from what you've seen thus far, do you see something like this happening again? What do you think this means for the future?
Is that for me?
Yeah, it's for you and the fellow and everyone, but it's going to be a closing.
I think that it's very possible that we could have another attempted insurrection or attempted unrest. I mean, the only thing, I mean, outside of the horrendous issue in Phoenix, the only thing that really held South Africa together were people and communities that sort of came together and said, you know, this shouldn't happen. We need to try and get control of CPFs that came to the party, civic groups that came to the party, communities on the ground that came to the party and said, no, let's try and get control of the situation, because obviously our politicians won't. I think it's very possible that we could have another unrest. I mean, if nothing has changed in a year, it's definitely a likely possibility.
Thank you, Kavil. Comment, Kavil? Again, what have you seen taken place from when July unrest took place till now? And do you think there's a possibility of this taking place again? Have things changed, or are they still the same? Are the same conditions there that will open up the possibility for more of what we saw last year? And is this the new norm?
Yes, I don't think there's going to be any changes. There has been any changes. I mean, I share the same sentiments. I think, I mean, can we speak about the Nandi Drive? I mean, it for me, it was a country that was lawless. It was lawlessness. In fact, there were police there, and the police were saying that we are protecting those who are not looting from the looters, because we have no other direction. And at some stage, they would. I mean, it was revealed that some of the police, the ammunition that they had was the only ammunition that was at the police station. There was no backup and anything. So there was a lack of resources, something that was revealed for the first time, that the country is not protected. But the issues on the ground are still there. I think they were visible during the floods, when governments were supposed to respond once again, like the unrest. We lost more than 300 people as well. But it was civil society that responded. Government is nowhere there. People are still in community halls. People are still struggling. So you have a government. In fact, during the floods, when people had died, and there was a donation that was made to actually bury the ones that lost their lives in the floods, Ward councillors started forming funeral parlors so that they could gain. So it's. I mean, we came to a point where we lost our moral values as human beings. That people who are poor, who have been washed away by floods, in the midst of their bereavements, we must, enrich ourselves. So right now, I think it's clear. KwaZulu-Natal does not have a leader. KwaZulu-Natal is confused. What will happen in December, one wonders, when the conference of the ANC takes place, and the faction that is expected to win in KwaZulu-Natal, which is that of the RT factions, which were, by the way, the people who were pushing this agenda of the riots and the unrest that took place. It was the so-called radical economic transformation, were the people who were pushing this. And in fact, when it all started, I was in town, coming out at a spa in St. George's. And this guy screamed in the middle of the road in West Street and said, "When's Zuma? What did Zuma do?" And that sparked people in the flats to come out, and they actually out of the windows and came out and they uttered the same way. When's Zuma? What did Zuma really do? And these people were all over the street, and immediately the street was this was around 6 o'clock, and I had to say, no, I have to leave town. But already there were WhatsApp messages that were speaking about these things. The evidence that we had of these WhatsApp were with the police, but there's nothing that has been done. But furthermore, there are issues that are supposed to be addressed in communities. The first response that the Minister of Police did was to send police in the informal settlements. But if you look at very well, the solar panels at the car park at Macro were not going to be carried by somebody with their hand and take them home. They really needed a truck. So there were really people who were behind all of this to ensure that we destabilize the economy. But we need not to shy away of the fact that there are fundamental issues on the ground that people are facing on a daily basis, particularly those who are living in informal settlements. They were affected by floods, they were affected by the riots, and they're still, their lives are riots on a daily basis because they don't have services. Services are not brought forth. The mayor only spoke about the floods recently. He was nowhere to be found because there's a lot of corruption that has taken place. I mean, the former mayor of eThekwini municipality took money that was meant to collect refuse for people in the city, particularly in the informal settlement. More than 300 million disappeared. When the AD, the Auditor General, wanted to come and investigate this, they were promised to be shot and they had to be withdrawn. So we are living in a state of mafia that is known. So I mean, you may think that thugs are out there, are gangsters, or thugs are out there in the cities robbing people. But there are thugs that are wearing suits and ties in the city hall in Durban. There are thugs in the legislature who are wearing ties and suits, who are continuously stealing. So eThekwini municipality has become a place where everyone makes money. So there will be money that will be pumped up to go and buy people in the conference. And that money is money that is meant to serve the poorest of the poor in this province. You ask me whether the unrest will surely come back. People's anger can go in many directions, and people are still angry. People are hungry. When you are hungry, you're bound to be angry, and you are bound to not care whether there's a bullet before you. But when stomach pushes you, you will actually go and take food. We never supported the riots. We never supported people who burned down flat. Infrastructure, trucks, and everything. But people who went to the shop and took everything are the people who are still today in prison, who can't even represent themselves and get lawyers. Are the people who went genuinely to take food. When you have a mother, a child, and a father being arrested for having been in the shop taking basic necessities, then you must know that we are in deep crisis in this country.
Thanks, comment, Tapelo and Kavil. Yeah, comment. So there you have it. A government that's unaccountable. The ones who are being arrested are the working class ones from informal settlements, while the mafia in suits, as comment Tapelo has referred to them as, are running free and exploiting further. He mentioned the people having a lived reality of riots every single day. And lack of accountability, a country on fire. It's quite a circumstance we find ourselves in. Where to from here? We said that there's going to be possibly a repeat of the riots we saw, the unrest we saw last year. Is that the only route? Is that the route that's most available to us? What are we doing in communities to imagine alternatives like the occupiers are? On the lead comments, closing us off. Where are we going from here? Riots, conditions are the same. Where can we go? Comment, you already spoke. I see a hand at the back. Why hasn't you spoke a long time? Let's go to Wazi and then why? Any other hands? Closing off comments. Let's get some. If we've heard the position, we've heard what's happened. Where are we going? Start us off.
Well, it's really scary
to think of it. Because currently, like, we have now made troubles, like more trouble coming in our side. I'm saying oil is rising, the Ukraine and Russia war actually also putting us in so many, maybe we're gonna see even bread prices rising and people are gonna get more hungry. So it's quite scary to think about where we are actually going. Because I know mostly we're still in a struggle where people in the location are still unemployed. We see families going to bed without food every day. So there's, and inflation is like everything is going up, so it's gonna be a struggle. So we're gonna see this like situation more and more in the upcoming future. So the fact that people mobilize themselves in the outer state, like the short term to operate themselves, they're not aware of the themselves to go and to loot at the city or wherever towns really. But I think we need to actually, in South Africa, we need to actually start localizing our systems. We need to start thinking locally, like to create system locally, not to actually depend. Even if we look at the same corporates, that's where our government is actually benefiting from the same corporates that are actually not sustaining us, because we are the ones waiting to these factories, we are the ones making money with them, but we are the ones who also suffer. As I'm saying, like in Cape Town at that time, we actually were struggling to go to work. Most of us in the location couldn't go to work. And some work, they would be work. If you didn't come, no pay. So there will be a lot of struggle moving forward as more as inflation is going and everything is becoming impossible to buy. We're gonna go to this factory and looting. I don't know how if the government, starting from the pandemic, never engaged. We don't know even the mostly, yes, the solidarity fund budget actually was mentioned, but it's vague, it's not even clear. We don't actually really understand how even that money went. So what can we actually expect more from our government if we're not getting access? So I will always advise from our local people to actually, let's start to build from local and start to actually build our own food systems and be self-sufficient, because we could see that our government is not there for us.
Thanks, comments. Again, the question is, where are we going? No, we can't go nowhere. We must go somewhere.
Okay, yeah, thanks, more. Yeah? Oh. I think before I can answer the question, I think as activists, as citizens, I think, we have to subject every information that has been provided before us today under a very radical scrutiny. I'm saying this, comrades, knowing very well that views are there for engagement, right? But for me, I think we must also move beyond individuals, because context matters. Because for me, there is this mainstream media sponsored view that what happened last year was just about Jacob Zuma. It was not about Jacob Zuma as a political figure. What happened last year was about exactly what explains the South African community. So that's my take. So your question is, where to from now? There is a very important and famous book which was written by George Orwell in 1949, and the title of the book is 1984. In the book, there is a character which is called Winston Smith, who rebelled against his party. And Winston Smith developed a habit of writing. So there are words which I want to quote. Winston says, until they become conscious, they will never rebel. And until after they have rebelled, they will never become conscious. As much as these words, comrades, carry multiple layers of meanings, but I think they apply to what happened last year.
Where to from here? Yeah, thanks, comrade. Last year's person made the crisis, but let me supplement my point. I will be short comment because I think comrade Mo tried to suppress. But comrade, I think the question, to answer the question, that there was an appetite to loot in Cape Town, but I will answer the question, but I need to first start just to give you a brief background. There was an appetite to loot in Western Cape, but the municipality or city of Cape Town was lucky because at that time we were trying to establish ourselves as occupiers, because we did not even need a bus or a taxi or a train to actually get to Cape Town. I mean, Cape Town literally is surrounded by occupations. So that's what I'm just trying to correct that as if maybe in culture there was no appetite to it. There was an appetite. But to answer the question, where to from now? Where are we going? Comrade, the reality is that a lack of political curiosity from young people in South Africa in general results to a question of meaningful uprisings. Because once young people do not become curious of the political situation in their country, they will be lookers at the higher level of which, and they will be lookers at the lower level of which. And that's the reality of our country. It is our role as young people in this space, white or black or Indian, to mobilize our own races according to our strivings of interest, and to conscientize our own people so that we hold these people accountable. And another question that we need to ask is the role of the private sector. We cannot only focus on the state. These people, they own, a lot of money. What is the role of private sector in the situation of poverty in the country? Because once we start, we'll be then debating from the actual question to say, who owns the means of production? Who owns wealth in this country? If we want to focus on the state has got the role, yes, to care about its own people. But the private sector also has the role to actually make sure that there is stability in the country, working with the state. So my conclusion or my submission is to say, comrades, let us then say no to looting. But looting will not stop as long as people are still in deep poverty. Because once people are hungry, they find their own avenues of getting food. Because it's stipulated in the Constitution that people, they have the right to eat. And once people don't have that right, actually, don't get that right, they will force it. In 2008, it was not called the looting, it was a xenophobia because it was directed to African people, Somalians. But now, because of it was directed to supermarkets that are owned by capitalists, therefore the media then favors and say it's looting. So we need to say this thing because it's racial at the same time. If we are not saying it because we are scared of whatsoever, then it means we are not honest to ourselves in these spaces of activism. That's my submission. So as we approach the end of the session, I want to ask people who haven't spoken, maybe people are new to this space. Some of the people speaking are from some of our own constituencies and they are politically but we also hear other people who are maybe new to the space, have something to submit. Where are we going? Any other hands? A lot of men are speaking. Okay, then. Do I have to stand up?
Pass the camera.
My name is Andy. I'm a student. So when the time of riots was happening, I was still in residence, so I wouldn't really position myself. Okay. So in this country that we have an issue of accountability. But I think also political parties are not working anymore. So, and because the issue of the crisis has been the crisis ever since we got even the so-called political freedom. So I think we should find a way of organizing such frustrations as our people outside of political parties, because I think clearly they have not been working. So if we can just find a way, I think our societies and organizations that have already learned on how to handle such issues, they know how to lead themselves, to develop themselves. So I think if we can find a way of controlling our anger and finding or creating organizations that will lead us forward without having to be called looters or rivals. So that's my suggestion.
Close us off, comrade.
Okay, that's fine. All right. Good evening, comrades. One of the things that I would say, we will continue with the history will repeat itself. I remember when I started to be in Kapuru and activism, things that we're facing, it was infrastructure when it comes to schools. And the other thing that we faced, it was the price of the sanitary pads that was taxed. After that, we went to fees must fall. After that, it was xenophobia. After that, it was a capital. So I believe each and every time there's going to be a pandemic in South Africa. And most of the people that are going to be affected by it, it's young people. Even if we take the spaces, like these kind of spaces, and we take it to Abu Philippe, Abu Kailicha, this hopefully will happen. Because that is the only thing we need to understand. And we can try and be readily liberated about it, but it will come back again. The history will repeat itself. Currently, we have the pandemic, which is load shedding. We all worry, how are you going to cook? How are you going to do this? How are you going to do this? And if you go to other stores like McDonald's, you'll find that there's a machine that is helping you to help yourself, meaning that it's catching people who are working. Unemployment rates will increase again. You go to Pick and Pay, I'll show to see, like here in Ox, that there's a machine. No one that needs to help you. You serve yourself. So it means that they cut in the number of people that are working. So I believe what the other comments said, that we need to start to be innovative in making our own things. But I don't know how, because funds are limited. There's no money that's coming to Kylie Child Group or whatsoever. We need to find our ways to find donors to support us. And other thing, the 350 thing, it's another scam. People are still waiting for their 350s. People who do not even need those 350 are the ones that are getting it. Now we find that even some other banks are trying to get part of the 350. How much are they getting? That's my question. Because if you're gonna go or you allow a bank to have that money, it means that you're gonna have 320 or 300 rand because of bank charges. Comrades, we need to stand up as young people and start thinking, what do we want? Not where are we going? What do we want as young people? Do you want the history to repeat itself? It will. Thank you, Makamani.
Thank you, comrades. Okay, so we're at the end of our program. I want to just thank Comrade Apelo and Kabir for joining us in this very fruitful discussion. We had a lot of insight and perspective, understanding of what took place. I also want to thank the comrades who are participating in the prep session. Very lively discussion that's fed into what we've discussed, how online across the country have seen part of this discussion followed. On behalf of Chisimani, I want to thank you for being here, and also Comment Jacobs as well for putting in as well. And I want to say, also, Chisimani, we are interested in alternatives. We are interested in the fact that we are seeing a state, we are seeing a government which has been increasingly unresponsive to the conditions on the ground. We're seeing a kind of decay of people's daily existences, and we're asking ourselves, what can we learn from the comrades who are organizing on the ground in alternative ways, in sustainable ways, in ways to develop ourselves and go forward, not towards the decay, towards the collapse, towards the imaginative, the alternative. What can emerge from that? So I want to, that's how we do our work generally, what our focus of our education is about. And this moment for us is just a point of reflection. What's happened in the last year? Where are we? Informs where we want to go, what we want, and how do we get there? How do we get there? So thank you again for joining us. That's the end of this session for tonight. I believe there's refreshments downstairs. Thank you. Thank you.